Y'all worshiping Serapis, the person who you think is Jesus Christ, who never existed. Never existed. Serapis did exist, but he exists as another person. They just gave him the name Serapis. You see what I'm saying? I know a lot of my Christian apologetics are probably at church right now. Hopefully I can stay live long enough for some of them to get in this chat and you know, prove to me that this person that y'all worshiping on Sunday, it's 12 noon over here. The sun's at its highest. You know what I'm saying? It's a reason that the Bible says that Jesus rose on Sunday. You understand? It's self-evident. It speaks for itself. A lot of us who were once Christians, believe in the doctrine of salvation. They believe in Jesus Christ. They believe that he is and was the Son of God, and that he came to save us from our sins or save us from our iniquity so that we can go to heaven. You know what I'm saying? All that's good. You know what I'm saying? Good story. Good storyline. But when you look at the motive, you understand, behind the Europeans to create this narrative, you know what I'm saying? You find out that it was all a theme to keep us in bondage. You know what I'm saying? Y'all gotta start searching the history on this stuff. If you really are serious about being a Christian or being a Muslim or being a Hebrew Israelite, you know what I'm saying? One of the Hebrew Israelites that accept the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and y'all need to start checking the true history on this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Jesus is Serapis. Clear. But you got to do the history on it. You understand? And that's what I'm here to talk about today on this beautiful Sunday, noon Sunday. You know what I'm saying? Any of y'all think y'all, have the truth. Y'all think y'all, are following, you know what I'm saying, the truth as it concerns Christianity. And I'm telling you now, Christianity was the first form of paganism. It was the first form of paganism that came into existence. You know what I'm saying? And why am I saying that Jesus Christ never existed? Why am I saying that he's actually Serapis? Because I got the history on it. You know what I'm saying? I got to give homage to the late Dr. Walter Williams, man. Dr. Walter Williams did a marvelous job on searching down this history, man, running it down and bringing it back to us. You know what I'm saying? The first book, he didn't have, his sources documented in the book, but, there was a time where he went and he revised the book and began to give the sources. You know what I'm saying? And, if you're going to be a Christian, the least you can do is try to find the true history outside of the Bible, because the Bible is not going to give you the true history on the character of Christ. You know what I'm saying? You got a lot of people out there that say, Jesus wasn't white, Jesus was black. You know what I'm saying? And you ask yourself, why they saying that? Well, they saying that for a multiple amount of reasons. You know what I'm saying? They said because what's said in the book of Revelations, where it describes his skin as bronze, you know what I'm saying, or tried in the furnace, you know what I'm saying, which clearly describes the color of a black man. Then you got others that say, how could Jesus have went to hide in Africa? You know what I'm saying? And not be found if he's white. You know what I'm saying? And then you got some that say that Christianity was created by African people. Now, there's a little bit of truth in that. As a matter of fact, there's a whole lot of truth in that. And that's what I'm here to talk about today on this live stream, on this beautiful Sunday morning. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of y'all do not realize and do not recognize that you are actually worshiping ignorantly the sun. You know what I'm saying? You can go into many different cultures and find the veneration of the sun. And it makes more sense because the sun is the actual giver and bringer of life. Without the sun, no one would exist. Everything on the planet gives homage to the sun. Everything. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, you know, why am I saying that Jesus Christ never existed? Because there is no historical, archaeological, paleontological artifacts or evidence that he ever existed. You see what I'm saying? And when you study this, according to Dr. Walter Williams, you got to break down the study and separate the study, you know what I'm saying, in two parts. You got the character of Christ, and then you have the literature that was created, you know what I'm saying, to give you the narrative of the man. You see what I'm saying? But I got a question. First of all, I got a question because I want to keep and stay close, you know what I'm saying, to the Sunday thing. You know what I'm saying? Sunday. So why does Jesus have a halo around his head? Have y'all ever asked yourself that question? What is a halo? A halo is a depiction of an illuminary behind the head or behind the body of Jesus Christ. Why is that? You understand? Why in the Bible does it explain in the 4 synoptic gospels? And it's actually 3. You got 4 gospels, but 3 of them are more synoptic than the 4th, which is John. You know what I'm saying? Which actually came later. Just like the New Testament and the Old Testament did not used to be a combined book. Y'all didn't know that, did you? You know, that's why you can go out and buy a little bitty small Bible that has the Psalms in it, and it also has the 4 Gospels. You know what I'm saying? Because there was once a time where the Old Testament and the New Testament was not compiled together. You see what I'm saying? But why is this that Jesus Christ in my live stream is said to be Serapis? You got to go all the way back to ancient history. And I know a lot of y'all are too lazy, you understand, to do that type of research, but you want to be Christians. And let me say this. Let me be real clear. You know what I'm saying? There's really nothing essentially wrong with living a Christ-like lifestyle. You see what I'm saying? And I'm finna hit y'all with some real potent facts. The main problem is 2 of them. The first thing is you have given away your divinity. What do I mean by that? You understand? You're worshiping something that does not look like you. You're worshiping a character that embodies your own divinity as a black person. You see what I'm saying? The second thing is this forgiveness thing. Y'all are so wrapped up in forgiveness. And then the Bible tells you, or it teaches, that if you don't forgive your brother, or your sister of their trespasses against you, then neither will your Father in heaven forgive you. And if you don't, that causes you to inherit hell. You're going to hell if you don't forgive. Well, let me just give you some logical knowledge and interpretation, right? God is said to be the judge of the universe. He is the judge, right? So you have the judge of the universe, and then you have secular judges that actually exist, and they have to judge based upon a judicial system or government. You know what I'm saying? And if you're innocent of any type of crime, then if they find you guilty of a crime that you actually did not commit, then that's considered injustice, right? You cannot be legally prosecuted and convicted of a crime that you have not committed. You see what I'm saying? This is what's going on in Christianity. You have this story that Jesus died for your sins, but it said that he was innocent. He had no sin in him. None. He did nothing wrong. You see what I'm saying? But the writers of the Bible were playing on your emotions. You see what I'm saying? In such a way to get you to accept this narrative by imputing guilt upon you as a human being. Now, a lot of us are guilty of a lot of heinous shit. I'm saying it's a lot of evil and wicked people out there. But the target people who they were targeting for this particular religious belief were black people, African people, or to be more clear, indigenous people on the planet. Why? Because Europeans went all over the planet pillaging and imputing guilt upon people who were indigenous to the areas that they were in. You understand? Coming in as missionaries and telling them that what they're doing is sinful and they need to accept Jesus and learn the doctrine of salvation. You understand? Forgive yourself and forgive each other and forgive those who came in and pillaged you. You understand? For all of the heinous things and heinous crimes that they committed against you. You know, as they robbed and stole and murdered and raped and robbed, you understand, your country and your people, you know, and they got you to subscribe to these religious practices. You see what I'm saying? So essentially, man, Christianity became the tool of tyranny. And this happened over a period of about, I would say, 13 to 1400 years that it took to implement this design. You know what I'm saying? It took about 1400 years to do so. And you got to go all the way back to the first Europeans who came into Africa with a design, you understand, to rule a people that were more intellectually powerful than they were, you know, who were the ancient Egyptians, who had a spiritual way of life that caused their civilizations to grow and to thrive. You know what I'm saying? So when the Europeans came into Africa, they were mesmerized by the level of civilization that they were able to create. You know what I'm saying? So this is what this go back to. Now all of my Christian viewers that might see this video, you know what I'm saying, get in the chat, you know what I'm saying, and prove to me or ask me any questions that you might want to ask, you know what I'm saying, predicated upon my title. Sunday worship is the worship of Serapis. You know what I'm saying? Who became Jesus Christ over a course and period of time. And this gets real intricate once you begin to understand, what actually happened. Now, I can sit up here and I can tell you this and I can speak these things to you, but, I have to promote the books that gave me the knowledge and put me on the path to where I can find out and understand for myself. Now, I haven't been an active Christian in some time now, but I do follow Christian principles and levels of Christian morality. You know what I'm saying? But it's all this forgiving, people who commit acts of sin against me and all that, I've been, stepped away from that idea, because it's just not true. God, the true God of heaven, does not operate like that. You know what I'm saying? He's a God of justice, not injustice. There's a Bible, there's a book in the Old Testament called the Book of Ezekiel. And the Book of Ezekiel clearly describes and itemizes that a person cannot die for the sins of another. Now, the sins of a person can affect another person, but judicially and legally, it's not right to punish a person for the sake of another. It's called injustice. And this is what Christianity is built upon. Injustice. But y'all don't know that. It took, God, the true God of heaven led me to this knowledge, man. Led me on a path to really, really understand what's really going on. Won't you, if you happen to get in trouble and you go before the judge, ask the judge to forgive you, because y'all got to realize that forgiveness is synonymous with the word pardon. Pardon is synonymous with the word acquittal. People who are guilty don't get acquitted. You see what I'm saying? And that term, forgive, is to only be used when a person is found not guilty. That's when you use the term forgive. That's when you actually forgive a person. When a person is innocent, but only after they have been accused of a crime. That's when that term is to be used. How did I get this knowledge? Listen, there's a book called the Black's Law Dictionary. It's a book that is used by Supreme Court justices. This is how they litigate. You understand? And it itemizes legal terms and terminologies that, attorneys and judges and people use in order to litigate. You see what I'm saying? So, I was led on the path to really understand, these things. And I come to the realization that this story of Jesus Christ was created to mesmerize indigenous people and usurp their God-given divinity from them. All right, so let's go back to 332 BCE when Alexander the Greek came into Africa. Mesmerized at the level of civilization that these people created. You understand? Who created the 7 liberal arts and sciences, medicines, geography, political science. What else did they create? Mathematics, literary system. They created the alphabet. They created languages. You know what I'm saying? Or should I say, they created alphabets for languages that they encountered. And to be more specific, the Greek language. The Greeks were illiterate. They didn't have no institutions to create literary systems. You know what I'm saying? The whole world was illiterate at the time of the ancient Egyptians, who created a spiritual system by studying the physics of the world. And from the knowledge of the physics of the world, they came up with certain philosophies that were spiritual. You're talking about people who knew the distance between the stars. You see what I'm saying? So when Alexander came in, you know, he wanted to rule in Africa, in Egypt, but he knew he could not rule these people. The ancient Egyptians were hundreds of thousands of years advanced at knowledge, but they were very, very positive people. They were humanitarians. You see what I'm saying? They went throughout the world to different continents, civilizing the indigenous people in those areas. They were even in over here in America, which was called the New World. Go to the Grand Canyon, you'll find tombs and temples. You see what I'm saying? So in any case, Alexander had a plan to rule Kemet by way of their spiritual system. Now what I'm doing is I'm finna give y'all the knowledge on how Jesus Christ came into existence, not the flesh, because the flesh never existed. This man never walked the planet, never died, never was crucified. All of that came from the story of Osiris. You see what I'm saying? That's where all that come from. The story of Mary, Mary Magdalene, all of that, you know, in the synoptic gospels, all of that is called patristic literature. You understand? Y'all need to write this down so you'll be able to go and study. I'm giving y'all scriptural references, but these are actually historical references that you can go and put next to your Bible and begin to find out, you know, the truth about what was really going on. You know what I'm saying? So in any case, Alexander came in after the Persians. He actually kind of got the knee off of the neck of the Africans, but he was still an invader, just like the other ones. You understand? And he went to the temple of, what temple that was in? I don't think it was in Memphis, but it was the temple of Apis. And he asked the high priest, you understand, who he was. Who was Alexander? Insinuating, because of his arrival into Africa as a liberator, because of those merits, he said that he was Asar or Osiris himself. And he wanted the ancient Egyptian priests to agree with him. They wasn't standing for it. They said, hell no. Man, you are a outsider. You have no royal blood in your vein. You are white. You are a white man. Come on, man. Hell no. You are not Asar. You are not Osiris. know what I'm saying? That pissed him off. That pissed him off. So he began the initiation of closing down temples, closing down institutions. See, when I say temple, you think about a church. You think about a place of worship. That's what you think about. But in ancient Egypt, ancient Africa, ancient Kemet, ancient Al-Kabulan, which began as the Kushite Empire, who they call a descriptive term Ethiopians, you know what I'm saying, down in the area of the Sudan, present day Sudan, you understand, this area was the source, was the area of the source of divine knowledge, but not just religious, spiritual knowledge. This is where the cradle of civilization began. So he was asked them, who am I? Ain't I Asar, or the express image of Osiris? Osiris is the Greek name for Asar. They told him, hell no. No, get out of here, man. You think this is, man. So he began to close the institutions, temples down. See what I'm saying? And over a course and period of time, what is called persecution of African people began to take place. But he wasn't all of that interested in a lot of political things that was going on. You know, everybody knows that Alexander was also a homosexual. So he was more interested in his boyfriend and finding other men to copulate with, you know what I'm saying? So he ended up dying 9 years later in 323 BCE. But one of his generals called Ptolemy Lagi, the first Lagi, also called Soter. Soter means savior. I want y'all to remember that. Soter in Greek means savior. Remember that. What was Jesus called? Or what is Jesus called? What are his attributes? Savior. He so-called saves people from their sins. Okay, so anyway, one of Alexander's generals followed in Alexander's footsteps, right? Followed in his footsteps. And he said, you know what? I'm going to try to take this plan a little bit further. I got to be real strategic in this. You know what I'm saying? So they had to go through the power structure. What was the power structure at? It was within the hands of the Egyptian priest society. You see what I'm saying? And at that particular time, they were called, oh, look at that, God Logic is up. Who's God Logic? I didn't mean to get off key. God Logic is one of the Christian apologetics. And I knew he probably would go live, you know what I'm saying, today on this beautiful Sunday that all people across the world who subscribe to Christianity are out worshiping Serapis, including him. You see what I'm saying? But he's a Christian apologetic, you know what I'm saying, that peddles this pagan religion called Christianity. You know what I'm saying? But in any case, give me a second. Give me a second, family. Right? So back to Alexander and Ptolemy. So Ptolemy did the same thing. He took the same route, but he was a little bit more strategic. He began to go to certain sects of the Egyptian priest society in the midst of their persecution, because mind you, what was the persecution? They shut the temples down. They closed the institutions of learning down, right? So they had them in a political headlock. You see what I'm saying? Because they were the authoritative power that invaded Kemet. Kemet was not known for its for being militarily powerful. You know what I'm saying? They were not ruthless. You see what I'm saying? So it was easy for Alexander and the Greeks to come in, and other nations and other cultures to come in and usurp the thrones. You see what I'm saying? So when Ptolemy, in the midst of the persecution, began to come go to the other Egyptian priests, he asked them, you know, very craftily to, you know, listen, our people are here. We're gonna be here. You know what I'm saying? You know, and we know that y'all have a spiritual way of life, and y'all have y'all gods. We have our gods. You know what I'm saying? But we want to coexist with y'all, but we don't feel like it's kosher for us to be worshiping your image of God. So because we don't know how to create images, we don't have the intelligence or the sciences or the knowledge to create images of God. Can you create an image of God for us and merge the attributes, give our God the same attributes, so essentially it'll be the same God? You know what I'm saying? And that way we'll have something in common to worship. This was his proposition to the ancient Egyptian priest society. And most of the ancient Egyptian priests declined, just like they did Alexander. They declined it. And this was going on about 323 after Alexander died to 320 BCE. BCE now. This is before Jesus Christ. This is before Christianity. You understand me? Christianity was no more in existence, hadn't even been thought of at this particular time, right? So they declined it. They was like, hell no. But due to the persecution, there became a split amongst the Egyptian Coptic priests. That's what I forgot to tell you. These were the Coptics. Now, let me give you some information on the Coptics. The Coptics were a mixed breed race, or should I say culture, you understand, of Egyptians. Some of them held to the views of their predecessors, and they had the divine knowledge, that the years of knowledge that was passed on through the institutions. So they had the knowledge of, and the sciences of the universe. They had it retained, but there were different levels of priests. You understand me? The black or the unmixed priests were the more knowledgeable. You see what I'm saying? But they were still Coptics. Coptics mean the time, you understand, of Alexander's invasion. You had the Coptics there, right? So there was a sect of Coptics. There were mixed breeds. You see what I'm saying? And they knew, you know, their maternal and paternal origins. You understand? uh, they agreed with Ptolemy. They agreed with him, which created an even deeper split and rift between the Egyptian priests. And they created a image of him personally. You know, you know, you can go back and find artifacts, archaeological artifacts of images of pharaohs. You know, understand me? And these images were extremely accurate when it comes down to the look of a person. They made them just like they look, almost like an artist who draws a person on paper. This is how precise they were. You see what I'm saying? So they created him an image, right? And after creating the image, they also gave that image the name of Osiris. You understand? Because remember, Alexander wanted to be God in the minds and the lives of the Egyptians. They coveted worship more than they coveted information. They wanted to rule, and that's the only way they could have ruled them anyway. You could rule their bodies, but you could not rule their minds. This came down the line of history and time. You understand me? 1400 years later, you understand, where the European began to rule the indigenous population through religious practices. And how they kept that rule was through Christianity and the other two religions, Islam and Judaism, right? So Ptolemy had them create this image, and then they gave him the name and the attributes of Asar or Osiris, but they also gave him another name and they conjoined it, right? The other name was an attribute of Osiris, which was the attribute of resurrection, which was depicted as a bull. And the name of the god was called Apis. It was called Apis. Those attributes were incarnation and resurrection. That attribute of Asar, or his ability to resurrect the dead or incarnate, see what I'm saying? Bring life, or bring a human, or give a human being life. You see what I'm saying? So what they did was they combined the name, and they called the name Serapis. And then over a course and period of time, they took the Osir out and they just called it for short Serapis. You understand? This is history. This is history. And before I even learned about Dr. Walter Williams, I had seen this image before. And when I saw the image of Serapis, I didn't even really pay no attention, because I wasn't really, I was steeped in Christianity. I didn't really, have a desire to search out the origin of that in which I believe, to make it more concrete within me, to be more accepted. You understand me? That's just like if you want to go to a school, you're going to do your research. You know what I'm saying? You're going to want to find out, you know what I'm saying, the history of that particular institution, you know what I'm saying, to see, okay, is this a school that I want to go to, you know, or X, Y, and Z, you know, the same way you should do with your religious belief. Go and try to find out, you know, the historical origins thereof. But if you do any type of exhaustive study on Christianity, this is where it's gonna take you. It'll if you just do it in the Bible, it's going to take you to a whole lot of lies. Even if you do it haphazardly, historically, you'll run back into the first, second, and third, fourth century. You understand? AD, and you're going to run into a lot of patristic lies. You understand me? That Christianity was in the first century. You got to realize that Jesus Christ was said to live or have been born in the first century AD and died in the first century. In fact, it said that he died in 30 AD. You see what I'm saying? And I heard God Logic talking to another Muslim. You know, they like to attack the Muslims. They get the Muslims and they back them into a corner, and because the Quran is intentionally written in a way to give Christians and Jews authority over them. You see what I'm saying? And he knows that. So, but I heard him say that the prophet Isaiah wrote about Jesus, prophesied about Jesus coming 700 years before his coming. And I thought about that. I'm like, what? Okay, so if I go 700 years before 30 AD, before the death, even the first century, let's say year 1, 700 years before that, nobody was literate at that time. This is why they tell you that the prophets were divinely inspired to write books as illiterates. Impossible. But I know you're going to say, you know, all things are possible to them that believe. Nothing is impossible for God. God can magically give an illiterate person the ability to read and write as a grown man, having not went to any institutions to learn. Come on, man. Y'all gotta stop trusting these types of theories. It's just not true. It's not true. Oh man, but anyway, he said Isaiah wrote, and this is his source. This is another source. You understand, to prove that Jesus Christ existed. God Logic or Avery, if you come across this live, you need to get at me, man. You need to get with me, because you kicked me off your podcast. You kicked me off your live stream because I was finna bring you some truth, some facts. But you don't, you apologetics, y'all don't want to deal with this type of truth. You don't want to deal with this because I feel like it'll hurt your pockets. And then essentially it won't. It'll just give you some more content. But in any case, back to Serapis. So, at 320 BCE, what does BCE mean? Before the Christian era, or before Christ. You understand? Which Christ is before that. When you understand what the Christ is, the Christ comes from the Greek Christos. But in African language and knowledge, is called the caress. Y'all give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Just rock with me. If y'all got any questions, you know, Type in, tap in. Tap in with me. Give me half a second. I gotta go run do something, but just bear with me for a bit. I'm back. So yeah. So Serapis was created by the Egyptian priests for Ptolemy. And that was his exact image. That's how he looked. That was his image. You understand? But in the beginning, they rejected it. So he closed the temples down. He closed the institutions of learning down. And then he confiscated all of the divine scrolls that had not just the knowledge of divinity in it, but it had the knowledge of the cosmos and the 7 liberal arts, mathematics, geometry, you understand, geology, medicine, you understand, architecture, you understand, all the knowledge that exists today. He confiscated those scrolls, you understand, and then once he was accepted by a group or a sect of Egyptian Coptic priests who were in Memphis, he took those scrolls and he housed them in their temple, right? And this began the saga, understand? And this began the instituting of Serapian worship. And then over a course and period of time, at the decline of the Greek occupation and rulership in Kemet, there was a Serapian temple built called the Serapis. You understand? That was built by Ptolemy the Third. You understand? Not Ptolemy Philadelphus the Second, but it was Ptolemy the Third, Euergetes I, who was also called Epiphanes. Right? They created a temple for Serapis, which was their own temple to be worshipped. And you had those Egyptian Coptics worshiping Serapis and worshiping Osiris. So it was like an ecumenical movement. This is where these terms come from in the ecclesiastical church or in the Catholic Church. Ecumenical movement. See, these things started in BC time, but it was done by force back then. You see what I'm saying? And I ask y'all to forgive me for having to step out and, go and check on family, but I'm finna give y'all this truth, and y'all need to get on here. Hopefully we get some brothers that get on here and talk, because we gonna find out who telling the truth and who propagating lies. Because there's too many lies being told today on Sunday. The embellishment, you understand, of ancient spiritual knowledge that's wrapped and trapped and housed in Christianity. You see what I'm saying? So, you had the Serapeum built. You had this institution of worship, not learning, because the Greeks were illiterate. And that which they knew, they had learned in part from the Egyptian priests. Now, I want to add this into the equation, right? So, once they confiscated the divine scrolls and manuscripts, see what I'm saying? They could not read them. They could not articulate nothing in the scrolls. And the priests that had a little bit of the knowledge, you understand, would explain to them in their language, because the Egyptians had to learn by force the Greek language. And in turn, the Egyptians created an alphabet to their language. And this is where, according to Dr. Walter Williams, this is where you get the Greek alphabet. You understand? And the Greek literary system that was created by the Egyptians. You got all these talks by Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Homer, Pythagoras. According to true history, these people never existed. These were incarnated names. Also, according to Dr. Walter Williams. And I know that his sources are true, because when you really do the math on a lot of the times that these people supposed to existed, like the Greek so-called scholars who lived before Alexander, they said that these people studied with the ancient Egyptians before he even came in to Africa, before Alexander came into Africa. Okay, well then that means Alexander should have been literate when he came in. How come they didn't create any institutions of learning on their own, you understand, to teach their heads of state how to learn? I mean, how to read. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You see what I'm saying? So in any case, all of this was going on around the time that the Romans came in and took power from their brothers. Why do I say brothers? Because the Greeks and the Romans are essentially the same people. They just speak different languages. They come from the same branch of people out of them Caucasus Mountains, right? So, they closed down temples. They closed down institutions of learning because they wouldn't accept him or accept Ptolemy as a god. You understand? And then when he was finally accepted by a sect called the Melkite Coptic Egyptians, or Melkite priests, you know, they begin to teach them the rudiments of what it means to have the attributes of a czar, right? And Ptolemy became what is called the vicar of Serapis. Vicar means in the place of, or the incarnation of. So he was the Greek Asar. Serapis is the Greek Osiris. See what I'm saying? Listen to me very carefully on this Sunday worship. You're getting the true knowledge, you understand, of your so-called Christianity, right? So when the Romans took power, they merged a political structure, a bipartisan structure, with the Greeks, and they became the Byzantine Empire, right? They became the Byzantine Empire, and the Romans were a whole lot more savage than the Greeks, you know. So they needed the Greeks, and they just piggybacked off what already had been taking place. You know what I'm saying? They piggybacked on what already had been taking place, and all of this was going on in Northeast Africa, right? Around the area of between the Black and the Caspian Sea, over in Turkey. You understand? This is where, you know, in the Bible it talks about the 7 churches of Laodicea, and you know, in what the Bible talks about in Revelations. You know what I'm saying? So when the Romans came into power and took power from the Greeks, they merged and became the Byzantine Empire. And this happened around, I would say 300 BC, right? Around 300 BC, they began to take power, right? And then they merged. You see what I'm saying? And in the course and period of time of this bipartisan political union, you see what I'm saying? They were learning the rudiments of Serapian worship. They were not learning how to read and how to write. They were only learning the spiritual aspect of that in which they called God. You see what I'm saying? So let's deal with a little bit of religious history, right? This is what you can now call the beginning of religion, right? And look up the term religion, religion, right? What is a legion? A legion is or considered 1,000 or a group of 1,000. See what I'm saying? So religion or religion is a type of reorganizing. You understand? Reorganizing a spiritual practice that turned into a religion. They were relitigating spirituality, if you would. You see what I'm saying? This is why you can go to the New Testament, and there's a book in the New Testament called the Acts of the Apostles. I used to ask myself, why do they call it the Acts of the Apostles? When you look at it, just reading it, you're not thinking like a lawyer or an attorney. You understand me? Or a politician. These terms, when you read act, you're just like, okay, what they did. You know, the acts. You know, he jumped over the broom or jumped an act. No. These are ecclesiastical terms. These are law terms. You understand me? Like when something comes into law, it's called an act. That's what it's called. So by the time you go to the New Testament and you read the book's titled Acts of the Apostles, this is what that's talking about. What is an apostle? See, listen, man, this stuff goes so deep, man. An apostle essentially is a type of politician, a litigator. See what I'm saying? A lawyer, if you would. Or has the abilities and capabilities and faculties of a lawyer, but more like a senator. You see what I'm saying? Or commissioner, if you would. You understand? A one who has his or her occupation, you understand me, as a lawyer. You see what I'm saying? So an apostle, where does the term apostle comes from? See, when you go to Google and you Google apostle, you Google apostle, it's going to give you a biblical definition, you know what I'm saying, of what an apostle is. But you just deal with the word. See, when you understand, study literacy or literature or linguistics, you understand me, or etymology, you can break a word down and find out what words actually mean. You know what I'm saying? And apostle comes from the word apostasy. And apostasy, apostate. What does it mean? It means to turn away from, or to turn away from truth. You see what I'm saying? Or change the truth. You see what I'm saying? There's a term called a person being apostate. There's a term called the apostate church. So how does apostle not have anything to do with turning away from something that was, or teaching a doctrine that is in contradiction of what came before? See, y'all don't think, you don't think on these levels. You got to be literally led by the true and living God to, think on these levels. You know what I'm saying? And that's what began to happen to me. I used to study the Bible, man. I'm studying the Bible so hard and so strong, you know, because I'm trying to go to heaven, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get there, trying to come out of sin, which is a good thing. You don't want to be out here practicing unrighteousness and stuff like that, because, you know, karmatic experiences are real. You know what I'm saying? But that was just a little side note. But anyway, the Greeks and the Romans came together and created the Byzantine Empire. You know what I'm saying? And once that happened, that was a very pivotal point for Christianity. You understand? Because now you have two sects of people working together with the Coptics. Now the Coptics are split. You understand? They were divided because there was some that didn't want to, you know, turn over this sacred knowledge to these invaders. Why? Because they were evil people. They didn't feel like they should have what they call divine knowledge because of what they would do with it. You know, how they would operate in that knowledge. You know what I'm saying? So once the Byzantine Empire came into being, they began to work together with those priests, ancient Egyptian priests that were working for them. You understand? They began to create this religion called Christianity. And it wasn't even called Christianity at this point. Christianity had not even come into being, right? They still had to implement the worship of Serapis and place that as the supreme worship item, if you would. You understand? They had to use or to usurp the divine triad or trinity that was once before: Osiris, Isis, and Horus. This was what was going on. So they ended up coming up with 5 council meetings, ecumenical movements, ecumenical meetings, right? Where the Egyptians can argue and debate amongst themselves on behalf of the political power of the Byzantine Empire. You understand? See, I have to, the only way that I could, the only way that I can illustrate this for you is this way, step by step. You understand me? Because history is a step-by-step thing. Why? You understand? Because of what is called, what is that? Order of operations. You understand? Order of operations. What came first? What came second? You understand? You gotta follow the dates, the times. You understand? The history of these happenings, right? So you believe that Jesus was born in 1 AD, because you know BC time goes down. So I'm saying you subtract from BC time, right? And at the time of what they call the year of our Lord, that's year one, when they switched to the Gregorian calendar and they started time all over again. And there's a place in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, that it said that the devil will seek to change times and laws, and they did. They did. You know what I'm saying? They changed the whole calendar, right? So they implemented an ecumenical movement and created 5 councils, right, to discuss the implementing and usurping of Osiris with Serapis, right? And in the midst of all this, people who had the truth, who had the true spiritual knowledge of the divine Trinity, had gone underground and were teaching their people and worshiping their divine Trinity. So they were in the process of trying to wipe them out during the persecution. You had a Decian persecution. You understand? Decius was a Roman emperor. You understand? I think it was around 205 or something like that AD, where Egyptians were continuing to be persecuted because they wouldn't turn over the divine scrolls and manuscripts. You understand? Those that they had hidden, those that were not all confiscated during the time of Ptolemy, right? So, which these divine manuscripts would give them more of an ability to usurp Osiris, because they would have the knowledge, they would have the understanding by way of the Coptic Egyptians, who had a little knowledge, but those who had more of that knowledge had retreated deeper down into Africa, or up south, up into Africa, back down toward the Sudan, closer to the equator, where it was extremely hot. Them Europeans, they didn't want no parts of that sun down there because they knew it gave them sun cancer. You know what I'm saying? So they didn't spend a lot of time in those very temperate zones, but their power was stretched forward down to those borders. You know what I'm saying? So these ecumenical council meetings were 5 council meetings. You understand me? You had the Council of Nicaea, or the Council of Nice, in 325 AD, right? You had the Council of Constantinople I, that was in 381. You had the Council of Ephesus, which according to Dr. Walter Williams was the most important council meeting. You understand? And that was in 431. Then you had the Council of Chalcedon, which was in 451. And then you had the Council of Constantinople II, which was in 553, right? And each one of these council meetings, there was the implementation of certain doctrinal issues that came about through suppressing the worship of Asar, delegating his attributes to Serapis, right? And excommunicating anybody that went against it. That's what those council meetings were all about, and a step-by-step process. And in that process, Serapis began to elevate in the minds and in the lives of the people. This is the history of the object of Christianity, which is Jesus Christ. The literature came hundreds of years later because they had no literature. There was no story. There were no gospels. There was no Injil. The only story of a resurrected Christ was thousands of years before that with a Saul, which was your first resurrection story. And you can see that story embedded and infused in the fabric of the story of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, all the way down to what is called the crucifixion, all the way down to the way they killed him. You see what I'm saying? They stole the story. Facts. You see what I'm saying? So, but in these ecumenical council meetings, you know, the first one, the Council of Nice, in 325 BCE, no, 325 AD, right? This is what Christians said Christianity was already in existence, and it wasn't. See what I'm saying? This is where they began to create the tenets of the attributes of Christ. And they didn't create them, they imparted them. They imparted them to the image of Serapis. They imparted, you understand, all of the attributes. And they suppressed the true teachings of spirituality that were held closely by the Egyptians and all the other people that worshipped Osiris and Isis, right? So let's before we can't get into that right now. I'll use another live or another video to get into what actually was said at the council meetings. But let's deal with the Sunday worship or the sun, right? In the ancient Egyptian divine triad, you had Osiris, Isis, and the divine holy child, Horus. Now, Horus is depicted as a falcon. Now, this clearly shows you whenever the Egyptians gave or anthropomorphized a human being, that shows you that the human being never existed. You see what I'm saying? It was a pictorial to give you a spiritual philosophical thought of a divine attribute, right? Africans were heavy in imparting this type of science. You see what I'm saying? So in the Council of Nice, there was a usurpation of Asar by way of Heru, right? Who is Heru? Heru, or Horus. Horus is connected to the term horizon. What is the horizon? What is the horizon? The horizon is the place where the sun begins to shine and to be visible to you. You see what I'm saying? Early in the morning when the sun breaks the horizon, the horizontal line between the earth and the sky, right? So what the Byzantine Empire did through the ancient Egyptian priests, they took Horus out of the divine triad. And remember, or if you have any knowledge, Horus was literally the sun. Literally, the S-U-N, not the S-O-N, the S-U-N. Right? So, at the Council of Nice, the first ecumenical council meeting, they turned Serapis into the S-O-N. The son of what? The son of the god Osiris. And they took Horus out of the equation. And the argument between the Egyptian priests, the two sects of Egyptian priests, not the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire were on the sideline, right? Instructing them on what to do, but they didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the power to implement this type of worship. They didn't have the power to do so. They didn't have the knowledge to do so. They couldn't even read the manuscripts. They couldn't read it. See what I'm saying? So how could they argue amongst themselves? And this is during this time period is when Christians say Christianity was already in existence. When your Christ wasn't even on the throne yet. There was no story of him. That story came hundreds of years later. Right? So there was a spiritual argument that turned political. An argument amongst two sects of Coptic Egyptian priests. You had the Melkites and you had what is called, according to Dr. Walter Williams, the exterior Coptic priests. Right? These two sects, one disagreed with the other. The exterior Coptics disagreed with the Melkites because the Melkites began to work in favor of the Greeks and the Romans to usurp their god Osiris and give him those attributes. So within that split, that's where the Byzantine Empire gained power. That's where they gained power. That power was harnessed by a man named Constantine, the Emperor Constantine. Hey, this finna get real deep. It's finna get real deep. See what I'm saying? Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, man. On this beautiful Sunday afternoon. See what I'm saying? So these priests were delegating spiritual attributes to this pagan god, Serapis, the attributes of Osar or Osiris, right? And they began to dismantle the first divine trinity. God the Father, Osiris, God the S-U-N. Now, let me give you some information. The S-U-N, like I said, was depicted as a falcon. The man had the head of a falcon. Why a falcon? Because a falcon flies the highest in the sky where the sun is at noon. Right? So they use that what is called a typology. Right? They use that typology or typification to illustrate a spiritual divine essence, if you would, right? That sun, S-U-N, was actually the spirit of Asar. This is why in the Bible you have a pictorial of the Shekinah glory between the two cherubim or the two angels. That spirit or that glory is the glory of the sun. This is where they stole all of this from, right? So they turned Osiris's son, Horus or Heru, and they gave the attributes of Horus to the S-O-N. They turned the S-U-N into the S-O-N. And this is why every picture of Jesus, you see the halo around his head. This is why you see that. You see what I'm saying? So this is what's going on in the Ecumenical Council meeting of Council of Nice. And they came up with what is called the what do they call that? The Apostles' Creed or the Homogeous Creed. And at that council meeting, they came up with a saying: God the Father, God the S-O-N, the Son, the same. They were trying to make Serapis the same as Osiris. And in so doing, they give Ptolemy God-like powers, or they incarnate God as a man, when the ancient Egyptians never taught that God was a man. The ancient Egyptians taught that the Pharaoh facilitated the powers of God and the political powers of God, because human beings have the Spirit of God in them by way of the Son, because they saw that the manifestation of the Son was the Spirit of God. That's what they taught. They never taught that a man will rise from the dead. The physical body of a man will rise from the dead. They never taught that. That's taught in Christianity. It's not true. You see what I'm saying? So this is what was taking place at the Ecumenical Council meeting of Nice, or Nicaea, in 325 AD. Like I said, Christianity wasn't in existence yet. But Christians are going to tell you, Christian scholars are going to tell you that Christianity began in the 1st century. It's not true. They had no literature. They say that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote at that particular time, where they first, they didn't exist, and second, they were illiterate. They could not read or write. Oh, well, God gave them the power to do it. Man, stop lying. You're lying. It's not true. It doesn't happen like that. No one receives miraculous knowledge. It doesn't happen like that. I'm giving you facts. You're worshiping Serapis on this Sunday morning. You're not worshiping Jesus. Okay, so let me give you this too. Let me give you this too. I'm sorry, I got a message. Jesus, the word Jesus, or in Latin, Jesus, comes from the god Zeus. That's also who you worshiping. Why do I say you're worshiping Zeus? The Greeks, who came into Africa first and ruled in Africa, they were worshipers of Zeus. You see what I'm saying? This is why the name ended up being changed, because you got to realize they're trying to separate themselves from Asar. They only use the name Serapis or Serapis so that the Egyptians would worship this white image. But they wasn't going for it. They wasn't going for it. Right? They wasn't having it. They was not having it, man. You understand? And then another thing, who was the god of the Romans? Who was their most powerful god? Jupiter. Jupiter was their god. And mind you, like I told you, the Greeks and the Romans combined to create the Byzantine Empire. So when Christianity began to resonate with the people, and the name of the Christ character went from Serapis to Jesus or Jesus, all they were doing was delegating power to each other. What they and like in Christianity, it said in the Bible, it says that upon this rock I'll build my church. This is what Jesus said in the Bible. Upon this rock I'll build my church. What church were they talking about? What was the rock? Who was the rock? The rock was a man named Cephas. But who is Cephas? Cephas was Peter, another one of the disciples who was turned apostle that couldn't read or write. You understand? Who is the god of the Romans? Jupiter. Jupiter. Y'all, how many of y'all know that a J can be silent? Hey. Hey, Zeus. You know what I'm saying? You know the letter J didn't come into existence in 1611. You understand me? So, who is Peter? Who is that rock? Jupiter. Peter. Peter is Jupiter, the god of the Romans. Jesus, Zeus, god of the Greeks. This is how they putting their church organization together. This is how they're creating this Christianity. See what I'm saying? No. This is how they created it. This is what's going on. And see, I jumped up and gave you a little nugget right there. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm trying to stay on course and stay on timeline and show y'all how y'all worshiping Serapis and how y'all worshiping Zeus and how y'all are worshiping Peter, Jupiter and Zeus. Upon this rock I'll build my church. This is what Zeus said. Upon this rock, Jupiter. Zeus is saying, upon this rock, Jupiter, I'll build my church. We hadn't even got to the literature yet. We ain't even got to the literature. See what I'm saying? We ain't got to the literature yet. See what I'm saying? So, anyway, at the first council meeting, 325 BCE, you had the ancient Egyptian priest delegating power from Osiris to Serapis. Go look this up, man. Go look it up. I'm telling you, I'm giving you facts here. You understand? Jesus was supposed to have died at 30 years old, 30 AD, but he was born in the first century, year 1, according to the Gregorian calendar. You understand? But Jesus' name wasn't even in existence at that time. It was Serapis. You look up Serapis, you'll see an image of Serapis and put it next to Jesus. They look the same. Same person. Same creature. Now the argument was that part of the priest said that he had a divine spirit like Osiris, but not a human nature. The same thing they arguing about in Christianity later on. You see what I'm saying? This became your doctrine of Christianity. What the ancient Egyptian priests were arguing amongst themselves about, trying to transition and give the Greeks or the Europeans a religious system. Part of them wasn't having it. See what I'm saying? Part of them wasn't having it. So they implemented God the Father, God the Son, the same. And there was a man named Arius who went against that. He said, no, I'll give him a Osiris-like spirit. But we never taught that Asar had a human nature. That's us. We have the human nature, and the spirit of Asar is inside of us. That's what they taught. But the Greeks and the Romans wanted to be God in the minds of the people. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, man. When I get back later on today, I'm going to start back where we left off. You understand? And we going to deal with this situation. I'm going to go into the ecumenical council meeting, the Council of Nice, and I'm going to highlight the arguments, and I'm going to show y'all what actually happened. And then we got to fast forward to the point to how they gave him a human nature. This is where Mary comes in there. And then if you know anything about Christianity, you can go to one of the synoptic gospels, preferably Matthew, where it talks about how Jesus was conceived in a immaculate conception. Peace, family.